In the crisp winter morning, the northern English countryside lay silent and still. Frost covered the ground like a delicate white blanket, and a gentle mist hung between the bare trees of Millbrook Forest. Thomas Williams trudged along his familiar patrol route, his boots crunching against the frozen ground. At 42, Thomas had seen better days. Unemployment had stolen his confidence, and the recent loss of his wife had left a deep emptiness in his heart. His park ranger jacket was worn, his gloves threadbare, but his eyes remained sharp and alert. Something unusual caught his attention. A strange sound, not quite a crash, not quite a whisper, broke the morning silence. Birds suddenly scattered from nearby trees, and an unnatural stillness fell over the forest. Thomas paused, listening carefully. In the distance, something gleamed between the trees. It wasn't like anything he'd seen before, a metallic object that seemed to pulse with a soft, almost breathing light. As he approached, the full extent of the strange object became clear. It wasn't a typical aircraft or anything remotely familiar to human technology. The object had carved a deep groove through the forest, snapping ancient trees like matchsticks. Steam rose from its surface, mixing with the morning mist. Thomas's heart raced, but curiosity overcame his fear. Years of ranger experience had taught him to approach carefully, to observe before reacting. As he drew closer, he noticed intricate patterns on the object's surface, not like any machine he'd ever seen. They seemed almost organic, like veins, or intricate biological designs. The metal, if it was metal, seemed to shimmer and change slightly as he watched. A small opening appeared on the side of the object. Thomas froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the radio on his belt. But something stopped him. A sound emerged. Soft, almost like a whisper of pain. Carefully, he moved forward. Inside the damaged craft, 3 beings lay motionless. They were unlike anything Thomas had ever imagined. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, with a slight blue tinge. They breathed slowly, each breath seeming like a massive effort. Thomas knew he had a choice. He could call authorities, step back, protect himself. But the memory of his wife Sarah flashed in his mind, her kindness, her belief that every living creature deserved compassion. Without thinking, he reached out. The closest being moved slightly, its eyes, large and deep like endless pools, opened and met Thomas's gaze. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. Thomas felt a connection, deeper than words, deeper than understanding. His radio crackled to life. "Thomas, you there? Unusual energy readings in your sector," came the voice of his former colleague. For a moment, Thomas hesitated. Reporting this would change everything. These beings were clearly not from this world, not from any world humans understood. They were vulnerable, injured, completely dependent on whatever help they might receive. "I'm fine," he responded finally. "Just checking a fallen tree. Nothing unusual." The lie felt heavy in his throat, but something inside him knew these beings needed protection more than they needed scientific examination. He carefully assessed their condition. They were badly injured, their breathing labored. Whatever journey they had been on had clearly been violent and unexpected. Thomas remembered his first aid training, the skills he'd learned over years of working in the wilderness. Slowly, carefully, he began to make preparations. He would need blankets, medical, supplies, and most importantly, absolute secrecy. The world wasn't ready for this moment, for the truth that lay hidden in this quiet forest. As the morning light grew stronger, Thomas realized his life had changed forever. Unemployment, loss, loneliness. They all seemed distant now. He had a purpose, a mission more important than anything he'd ever known. The beings stirred slightly, their strange, delicate hands moving almost imperceptibly. Thomas watched, a sense of wonder replacing his initial fear. Something remarkable was about to unfold. Something that would challenge everything humans thought they knew about life, about connection, about compassion. In the quiet of the forest, with snow beginning to fall and the morning mist slowly lifting, Thomas Williams made a decision that would change the course of human history. The small Millbrook hospital buzzed with unusual energy. Dr. Emily Parker stood in the isolation ward, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared to examine the extraordinary patients Thomas had discovered. Her medical career had been filled with challenges, but nothing could have prepared her for this moment. The three beings lay on specially designed medical beds, their breathing monitored by machines that struggled to interpret their alien physiology. Dr. Parker noticed how their skin changed color subtly, almost like a living camouflage responding to temperature and light. Thomas waited outside the observation window, his weathered hands pressed against the glass. He felt responsible for these beings, a connection that went beyond mere discovery. The hospital staff moved with a mix of fear and fascination, whispers echoing through the sterile corridors. "We've never seen anything like this," Dr. Parker muttered to her senior colleague, Dr. Michael Roberts. The medical equipment blinked and chirped, struggling to make sense of the alien biology. One of the beings, the smallest, began to move. Its movements were fluid, unlike any human motion. Its large eyes opened, revealing depth that seemed to hold entire universes. The creature made a soft sound, something between a whisper and a musical note. Thomas burst into the room, breaking all hospital protocols. "They're trying to communicate," he said, his voice a mixture of excitement and concern. Dr. Parker was about to protest, but something in the being's eyes stopped her. A connection formed, invisible but undeniable. The alien's hand moved, creating intricate patterns in the air. Thomas watched, transfixed. Jack Roberts, the local community leader, arrived with a team of local volunteers. They brought warm blankets, medical supplies, and a collective sense of compassion that surprised even themselves. The small town of Millbrook had always been close-knit, but this moment was testing the limits of their understanding. The smallest alien began to communicate through a series of complex hand movements and subtle color changes. Dr. Parker, a linguist at heart, started to recognize patterns. She pulled out a notebook, her medical training mixing with a linguist's curiosity. "They're not just communicating," she explained to Thomas. "They're sharing something deeper. It's like a story of survival." Fragments of their journey emerged, a catastrophic event in their world, a desperate escape, a journey across unimaginable distances. The beings had traveled further than any human could comprehend, driven by a hope of survival. Thomas found himself becoming their unexpected translator. His years in the forest had taught him to read subtle signs, to understand communication beyond words. He watched as the aliens shared their story, not through language, but through emotion and intention. The hospital became a bubble of extraordinary possibility. Local authorities wanted to quarantine, to study, to control. But Thomas and Dr. Parker fought for compassion. They saw these beings not as specimens, but as survivors. News began to leak. Social media buzzed with speculation. The small hospital in Millbrook became the center of a global mystery. People from around the world began to send messages of support, of curiosity, of hope. The alien beings grew stronger. Their technology was beyond human understanding, but their vulnerability was profoundly familiar. They showed signs of emotion, fear, hope, gratitude. Thomas noticed how they would reach out, seeking connection. "We're not so different," Dr. Parker said one evening, watching the beings rest. "They've lost their home, just like many humans have." Thomas thought of his own loss, his wife, his job, his sense of purpose. Now everything had changed. These beings had brought something unexpected, a chance to understand, to connect, to hope. As night fell over Millbrook, the hospital remained a beacon of extraordinary possibility. The aliens continued to heal, their bodies adapting to this new world. Thomas sat by the window, watching over them like a guardian. Something remarkable was happening, a connection that went beyond species, beyond understanding. In the quiet of the hospital, hope was taking shape, fragile, beautiful, and absolutely unexpected. The world would never be the same again. The small town of Millbrook transformed overnight. What had started as a quiet community now buzzed with an energy that both excited and terrified its residents. Jack Roberts, the community leader, stood at the town hall meeting, facing a room divided between fear and curiosity. "We cannot turn these beings away," Thomas Williams declared, his voice steady and determined. The room erupted into heated discussions. Some villagers wanted to protect the aliens, while others demanded immediate removal. Mrs. Elizabeth Thompson, the town's oldest resident, raised her hand. "My grandson is a soldier," she said, her voice trembling. "But even he would understand. These creatures are lost. They need our help." The aliens, now given temporary names by the locals, began to show remarkable abilities. The smallest one, nicknamed Hope, could generate a soft light that seemed to heal minor injuries. Unity could communicate complex ideas through subtle color changes on its skin. Courage seemed to understand human emotions with an uncanny depth. Dr. Emily Parker continued her research, working tirelessly to understand their biology. "They're not just survivors," she explained to Thomas. "They're seeking something more. A new home, perhaps, a chance to start over." Local schools became unexpected centers of learning. Children drew pictures of the aliens, created stories, asked endless questions. Their natural curiosity broke down barriers that adults struggled to overcome. The town's resources were stretched thin. Local businesses began to contribute. The bakery started providing special nutrition-rich foods. The local mechanics offered their workshop for potential technology exchanges. The community came together in ways nobody could have predicted. Government. Officials arrived, creating a tense atmosphere. Men in dark suits and stern expressions walked through the town, asking countless questions. But the people of Millbrook had become protective. They formed a human shield around the hospital, around Thomas and Dr. Parker. "These are our visitors," Jack Roberts told the government representatives. "They are part of our community now." The aliens began to share fragments of their knowledge. They showed incredible understanding of environmental restoration, of healing technologies that could potentially solve some of Earth's most pressing problems. It wasn't an invasion, it was an opportunity. Thomas found himself at the center of everything. His years of isolation as a park ranger had prepared him for this strange journey. He understood connection, with nature, with living beings, with hope itself. Local farmers began to experiment with the aliens' healing technologies. A field that had been barren for years suddenly showed signs of life. Crops that seemed impossible to grow now flourished. The aliens weren't just surviving, they were helping. Tensions remained. Not everyone was convinced. Some still feared the unknown. But day by day, the walls of misunderstanding began to crumble. One evening, something extraordinary happened. Hope, the smallest alien, created a light show in the town square. Colors danced in the air, telling a story of loss, of journey, of hope. Children watched in wonder. Adults felt something deep and unexplainable. "We are not alone," Thomas would later say. And being different doesn't mean being dangerous. The local church opened its doors. The school welcomed special classes about understanding. The community center became a place of learning and connection. Millbrook was changing, becoming something more than just a small town. Dr. Parker discovered that the aliens had survived something catastrophic in their world. They weren't conquerors. They were refugees. They had traveled unimaginable distances, hoping to find a place of safety, of understanding. As weeks passed, the initial fear began to transform. Curiosity replaced suspicion. Compassion overcame fear. The aliens were becoming part of Millbrook's fabric, its story, its future. Thomas looked out over the town one evening. The aliens worked alongside local farmers. Children played near their spacecraft. Dr. Parker continued her research. Something beautiful was happening, a connection that went beyond species, beyond understanding. Millbrook had become more than a town. It had become a beacon of hope, a place where the impossible became possible. And at its heart was a simple truth. Compassion knows no boundaries. The world was watching. But here, in this small corner of England, a new chapter of human history was being written. The world changed when the first images of the aliens from Millbrook leaked online. Within hours, billions of people saw something extraordinary, not a threat but a possibility of hope. Thomas Williams found himself thrust into an unexpected role. International media descended on the small English town, cameras everywhere, questions flying like rapid-fire bullets. Government officials from multiple countries arrived, creating a complex web of negotiations and scientific investigations. Dr. Emily Parker's research became the center of global attention. Her initial findings suggested the aliens possessed knowledge that could revolutionize human understanding of environmental restoration, medical treatment, and sustainable technology. They're not here to conquer, she told a packed international conference. They're here to survive, and in doing so, they might help us survive too. The United Nations called an emergency session. Countries that had been traditional enemies suddenly found themselves discussing a single topic: the beings from Millbrook. Political boundaries seemed to dissolve in the face of this extraordinary discovery. Jack Roberts, the local community leader, became an unexpected diplomat. He explained how Millbrook had welcomed the aliens, how they had become part of their community. His simple, honest words carried more weight than complex political speeches. The smallest alien, Hope, began demonstrating remarkable abilities. In controlled scientific environments, it could accelerate plant growth, purify contaminated water, and generate clean energy through processes humans couldn't understand. Scientists were stunned. Social media exploded with discussions. Hashtags, like your Millbrook Hope and alien friendship, trended globally. People shared stories of compassion, of understanding, of breaking traditional barriers. Universities worldwide started specialized research programs. The aliens' technology suggested solutions to climate change, medical challenges, and energy production. What seemed impossible suddenly became potential reality. Thomas watched as his small town became the center of a global transformation. The unemployed park ranger, who had first discovered the aliens, now stood as a bridge between two worlds. His simple act of compassion had changed everything. Military leaders who initially wanted to treat the aliens as potential threats began to see them differently. The beings showed no aggression, only a desire to understand and help. They shared technologies that could potentially end multiple global conflicts. Children became the most enthusiastic advocates. Schools developed new curriculum focused on understanding, on compassion, on seeing beyond differences. The aliens became unexpected, teachers of empathy and connection. Dr. Parker discovered that the aliens had survived a catastrophic event in their world. They were refugees, not conquerors. Their journey was one of survival, of hope, of finding a new home. International aid organizations began developing new protocols. How do you help beings from another world? How do you provide support, understanding, protection? The global economy started shifting. Countries that traditionally competed now collaborated. The aliens' technologies suggested solutions to energy crises, medical challenges, environmental destruction. Thomas reflected on his journey. From a lonely park ranger mourning his wife's loss to a global symbol of compassion, his life had transformed completely. The aliens had brought more than technology. They had brought hope. Millbrook became a symbol of possibility, a small town that had chosen compassion over fear, understanding over suspicion. People from around the world started visiting, wanting to understand how this transformation happened. The aliens, hope, unity, and courage, became ambassadors of a new understanding. They didn't just bring technology, they brought a way of seeing the world differently. We are not alone, Thomas would say in interviews. And being different doesn't mean being dangerous. Global leaders began signing unprecedented agreements, collaborative research programs, shared technological developments, new approaches to global challenges. The presence of the aliens had done what decades of diplomacy could not. They had united humanity. As the world watched, Millbrook remained a beacon of hope, a small town that had chosen to see beyond fear to embrace the unknown, to understand that true strength lies in compassion. The global awakening had begun, and it started with a simple act of kindness in a quiet English forest. The world would never be the same again. 2 years had passed since the aliens first arrived in Millbrook. The world had transformed in ways nobody could have imagined. Thomas Williams stood at the edge of the town, watching the remarkable changes that had taken root. The aliens, hope, unity, and courage, had become more than visitors. They were now integral members of the global community. Their technologies had revolutionized multiple sectors: agriculture, medicine, environmental restoration, and energy production. Millbrook had become a global research center. Scientists, diplomats, and researchers from every corner of the world came to study the remarkable collaboration between humans and their extraterrestrial friends. The small English town was now a symbol of hope and understanding. Dr. Emily Parker continued her groundbreaking research. The aliens' biological systems had revealed medical breakthroughs that could potentially cure diseases once thought impossible to treat. Cancer treatment had been completely reimagined. Genetic disorders were being addressed in ways that seemed like miracles just years ago. The smallest alien, Hope, had developed a particularly close relationship with the local children. It would spend hours in schools, teaching through visual storytelling that transcended language. Children learned about empathy, connection, and understanding in ways no traditional education could provide. Agricultural land surrounding Millbrook now produced crops at unprecedented rates. Barren fields became lush green landscapes. The aliens, environmental restoration technologies had turned seemingly impossible challenges into solvable problems. Thomas reflected on his journey. From an unemployed park ranger to a global ambassador of understanding, his life had taken an extraordinary turn. The loss of his wife, once a source of deep pain, now seemed like a distant memory transformed by hope and new purpose. Global conflicts began to diminish. Countries that had been traditional enemies now collaborated on shared technological and environmental projects. The aliens had brought something more powerful than technology. They had brought a new way of seeing the world. Jack Roberts, the Aber local community leader, had become an international diplomat. He traveled worldwide, sharing Millbrook's story of compassion and understanding. His simple, honest approach cut through complex political discussions. The United Nations established a new department dedicated to interspecies cooperation. Millbrook became the global headquarters, a testament to how a small town's choice of compassion could change the world. Economic systems transformed. The aliens' technologies created new job markets, sustainable energy solutions, and approaches to global challenges that seemed impossible just years before. Unemployment dropped globally as new industries emerged. Hope continued to demonstrate extraordinary abilities. It could communicate complex ideas through subtle light patterns and color changes. Scientists discovered that its communication was more than just a language. It was a way of sharing emotional and intellectual experiences. Thomas found himself giving lectures worldwide. He explained how a simple act of kindness, helping 3 vulnerable beings in a forest, had changed the course of human history. His story became a beacon of hope for millions. Environmental restoration became a global priority. Areas once considered irreparably damaged began to heal. Forests regrew, oceans cleaned themselves, and the planet started to recover from decades of human-induced damage. The aliens were not conquerors. They were teachers, friends, collaborators. They had traveled unimaginable distances not to dominate, but to survive, to learn, to connect. Dr. Parker discovered that the aliens' journey was driven by a universal hope, the desire to find a new home, to survive, to understand. Their arrival in Millbrook was not a coincidence, but a moment of cosmic connection. As the sun set over Millbrook, Thomas watched hope creating a beautiful light display for the local children. Laughter filled the air. Different species, different worlds, united by a simple, powerful emotion, hope. The global transformation had begun in this small English town, a place where fear could have ruled, but compassion prevailed, where differences were not something to be feared but celebrated. We are not alone, Thomas would often say, and our differences are what make us beautiful. Millbrook had become more than a town. It was a symbol of what humanity could achieve when it chose understanding over fear, compassion over suspicion. The new beginning had arrived, and it was more beautiful than anyone could have imagined.